Hey, this is Chris Davis, and you're watching Influencing Entrepreneurs.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting business owners, I realized that true knowledge comes from the wins and losses of those entrepreneurs. These are the stories of those business leaders. I'm Casimir Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs. Today we're here with Chris Davis of Buff Beauty Academy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Your school is taking off right now. Where did the idea come from?
So I was raised in the beauty industry all my life. My mom was a cosmetologist, and so I was that little kid sitting in the back of the hair salon while my mom was working. So I think it's always been in me. And then I come from an entrepreneurial family. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. They had a business. My mom did. So I think the entrepreneurial mindset, I was born with that, but the school came from just seeing a void in the employees that I was hiring, that they kept needing more training when they got to my business. And I said, there's got to be a way to fix this. And so I said, you spent all this money going to school, and then you come here and I still have to train you. And then once I got them up to speed, got them confident, giving them clients, what would happen? They would leave.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got to make sure you keep them, or you keep them educated consistently.
Yes.
So my mom was a cosmetologist and a manicurist in Detroit.
Oh, wow.
And in the early 80s. And it's funny you mentioned like growing up in cosmetology, because I actually remember she did so much nails. She did them out of her home. She had her own shop and like nail polish remover. Like when I smell that, some people it grosses out. I'm like, no, this reminds me of my childhood.
The thing about it is when you grow up with it, you don't think it's odd. You think like, this is just like the smells that I got used to hearing or smelling when I was
I
growing
remember
up.
by 10 seeing so much, like I could probably do acrylic nails if I really wanted to do that.
Wow, that's probably true, especially if you're a visual learner.
So anyway, you said, you always had this entrepreneurial spirit. Where did it start?
My grandparents would have me go to their shop. So they had a radiator shop, living in Detroit, Motor City. So my grandfather had a radiator shop, and every Saturday I would have to go there and answer the phones. I don't know that I even really knew what I was doing, but it was part of the deal. Like I was the only child, and okay, who's going to have Chris this weekend? I couldn't be at the hair salon every Saturday. So sometimes I would go to my grandfather's shop and I would just see him interacting with his customers. And then I would see my mom interacting with her customers. And I just don't think that I really thought that I ever had a choice. Everyone that I knew had a business, or they had a job in some type of extra like trade or side thing that they were doing. So
do you end up working at the beauty shop or at the auto parts shop?
I worked with my grandfather, just as a little girl, but my mom, she never encouraged me to be in the industry. Never encouraged it. I don't even think she ever thought that I would make money. And even, in my early teens, I was doing my friends' nails in school, and in high school, I would do my friends, and she would just be like, you like
you're kind of just
that?
doing it for fun, right?
Yeah, just doing it for fun, but it just came naturally.
Right.
And then we had the fashion plates growing up, the little game. So I was always very creative and artistic, but it wasn't encouraged. And I think it was because she worked so hard. She didn't want me to do that. So she was like, no, you're going to go to school. By this time, we had moved to California. So
we're at in California.
Inglewood.
Oh.
So I went to, they had a vocational like program for high school students. And this was in the 80s. So this was during the aerospace boom. And it was like, you can be an airplane mechanic or go into aerospace. And because I was Black and a woman, all the government contracts, you can make a lot of money. So that's what I went to school for. I went to Northrop University, and I knew by my third year, like, this is not what I wanted to do, because I was still sneaking and doing my friends' nails. And so I got the courage to tell her I didn't want to do it anymore. And I've been doing nails ever since.
So you leave this program in aerospace. Do you go straight to cosmetology school? Like, what is the next step?
So the next step, honestly, I just kept doing it. I was self-taught. I never went to school. This is a funny story I tell my students. I was self-taught for 20 some years. I never got licensed till I moved to North Carolina. I had businesses and everything. I just never really, I guess I probably felt like I didn't need to go. And then by this time I had moved back to Detroit. The inspectors were not coming to the salons in the inner city of Detroit. So I never felt like I had to do it. But when I moved to North Carolina, I was here probably about 6 months and I got fined twice. And the state board inspector said, if you do not get a license, you will never be able to get one. And so I went to school. I was probably the worst student because you have this person self-taught doing nails for 20 years coming to school saying, I just want to get my license.
You kind of have to unlearn some of the bad habits and pick up some of the new ones.
Exactly. And so I did that. I did a fast track. I still was taking clients. Once I decided to do that, the doors really opened for me because I think that I didn't have like the fear of being able to go into beauty supplies because now I didn't have to be afraid that they would ask for a license. You know, I could usually talk my way out of it, or because I just seemed like I knew where everything was, they really never questioned me. But going to school opened more doors because I was able to go to trade shows, meet more people, get ambassadorships and sponsorships and things. So that was the best thing for me.
And even just progress your personal development.
Yes.
The day you get your license in hand, what changes?
Confidence, the confidence of it, telling even my friends who don't have licenses to this day that still have businesses in Detroit, telling them that I'm licensed and then saying, well, I think I want to be a teacher. And they're like, you want to teach? And I'm like, yeah, I think I want to teach. And they're like, okay, that sounds cool. So then maybe about a year later, I went to my first big trade show and I met someone who was a mentor in my head, Tammy Taylor. And that was the only products that I ever had used in Detroit. And she was like, I've been watching your work and I think it's great. And I called my husband. I ran in the bathroom, called my husband. I was crying. I was like, she knows who I am. And he goes,
how did she see your work or know of your work?
Well, by then we were on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was like, I've seen your work and I think it's great. Would you like to work with us? And I was just like, oh my God, like she sees me. So from that point, my husband, who's a part-time musician, he said that was like him meeting Quincy Jones. He kind of likened that to it. So for me, that like changed everything. So I became an educator and I started doing trade shows.
So did you make the decision just based on meeting this person that you wanted to be an educator?
Yes.
And what was the sole purpose of being an educator?
To get discounts on products, to be close to her, to learn everything that she knew about business, because I felt like this was someone I could learn from. And I just was so excited.
You bring all this knowledge. What are the first things you start doing that you really see has momentum behind them?
The main thing was when you're done with your client, give them 4 business cards. 3 for them to give out to other people and 1 for them to keep for themselves. And you tell them, each person that comes, I'll give you $20 off your next appointment. And so a lot of people thought that that was, you know, a lot, but it really wasn't, because how much does it cost to get a new client? Right. And then if you are bringing me 3 people that each pay me $60 a piece, that's $180 that you're giving me, and all I'm giving you is $20.
Yeah.
You know, so I really used that to my best advantage. And then on the back of my business cards, it said, ask how you can get your nails done for free. And people would get that card and they'd be calling me, how do I get my nails done for free? I said, well, you have to refer me 3 people. Okay, I can refer you people. People were referring people before they even came the first time. Those kind of things helped me build my clientele really fast. And there's 2 high schools that was nearby. So, you know, I found the most popular cheerleaders. I did their nails. Go wherever the leaders are, because the people under them want to be like them. So if you go to the bank, do the bank manager's nails for free. All the people who work there are going to want to come because of them. And so with the cheerleaders, you know, they're the ones at school that everyone wants to be like or emulate. So then I did their nails. I mean, I had the whole sales thing down. And this was before social media, so it was perfect.
So then you start adding social media to the mix. That's where it was Tammy. What was her last name? Tammy Taylor takes notice. What were you doing on social media that gets attention?
Every picture that I was taking of every set, I would say using Tammy Taylor products. I love the product. Had been using it forever. But I knew that I was the only person in Charlotte using the product, because it was something that, you know, Detroit girls use. Like everybody was using it. Probably your mom used it too. And so nobody here was using that product. It looked completely different. Even the way I did nails looked completely different than the people who were doing nails here in Charlotte. So I knew that I stood out because of that. The other thing that made me stand out is I'm a Black girl. And people would say to me, I've never seen a Black girl do nails before. And I would say, really? And I mean, literally, they would walk past my room and just like be staring at me.
Is this here in the Carolinas?
Yes.
What about in Detroit?
Well, in Detroit, it's very normal.
Right.
Like every barbershop or every hair salon, there's a girl in there doing nails. More than likely, she looks like me. But here, most of the salons were Vietnamese owned. They would just say, like, I've never seen a Black girl do nails before. And so at first, I was like, what do you mean? And then I noticed that a lot of people were saying it. So this was at the time where President Obama, so like I said, I moved here in 2008. So this was the election, right? So around November, December, people kept saying that. I said, you're about to have a Black president. The least you could have is a Black nail tech.
Yeah.
So they would be like, oh, I never thought about that. Or I would say to them, your cosmetologist who does your hair, she had to learn how to do nails to graduate. And they would be like, really? So it was just like one of those things that people just never saw, and I just used it to my advantage.
So you start with Facebook, but as with all social media, it just starts changing over the years. How do you keep up with where to be on social media?
Well, remember, I had two teenage daughters. So it went from Facebook to Twitter. So then we had this thing called Hootsuite, which would post to both. So once I posted on Facebook, it would automatically go to Twitter. And then, it just kept snowballing from there. And then, of course, Instagram came into play. By then, I had a standalone salon uptown on Graham Street, so I was using that. And, I was also using the relationship that I had with Tammy to grow my following.
After you met with Tammy Taylor, you said, I want to educate.
Yes.
How does that turn from your own salon into true education?
During COVID is when, we were shut down. We could not work. And so at that point, I said, I never want to be in a situation where I can't work anymore. And so a friend of mine, her name is Mary Negron, she lives down in Augusta, Georgia. She said, well, have you ever thought about teaching or owning a school? I said, I've thought about it before. But for me, I had never seen anybody that looked like me, own a school, and B, teach. It was there's a lot of gatekeeping. Most schools are owned by families. And so they're not going to let an outsider get a license because then you potentially are their competition. And so during COVID, I was able to find a school that let me get all the information online. I started studying, and then I did what they call challenge the board. So in the state of North Carolina, if you have your license for now, it's a year, you can actually go back and say, hey, I think I know enough to be a teacher. And you can take the test. And if you pass and, you do a few other things, pass the test, then you have to make a lesson plan and go and stand before the board and, all those things. And I did it. And I got my license.
At what point do you find the irony that you didn't find value in school and didn't want to go, and now you're going to run one?
I found it the first day teaching.
Did you have a Chris Davis in the class?
Oh, every class, I have a Chris Davis. Matter of fact, I have a Chris Davis right now. And I tell her, I said, I remember being just like you. And I always just kind of own like, oh, I knew I was probably the worst student.
What makes them not only bad students, but probably great practitioners?
Well, the thing is, I have to unteach everything that has worked for them, even if it's wrong. So even if they've been doing something the wrong way, and now I have to teach them, this is how state board wants it. So what I usually say is there's a state board way, there's my way, and then you'll find your way. And hopefully there'll be a mix of the two. But let's just say you've always done something wrong, just holding your brush the wrong way. And then I say, no, this is how you're supposed to do it. Well, if you've taught yourself that this is what works, it feels odd for me to correct that. So it's much easier if I have someone who has never done nails because they don't have any preconceived notions of how things are supposed to go. And I can just literally mold them into the best student.
How do you become a Tammy Taylor to someone else?
I think the person just has to sit near the fire. I tell my students, like my desk is here, and I see like the same ones kind of will just sit close to me. I say, "You're trying to sit near the fire?" They say, "Yeah." So I think just kind of sitting there and just learning by osmosis and just being open and coachable. I think that was the main thing for me. I knew that Tammy had something inside that I really wanted, that I wanted to be attached to, and I just remained coachable and a student at all times.
And
So,
waiting for the moment that you say something to them that they go to the bathroom and cry and call their
yes,
husbands.
yes, yes. Well, it kind of happened this year. I had a young lady, the first week of school, they have to do a vision board. And, they talk about their short-term goals, mid-range goals, long-term goals. And she didn't want to show me her vision board. She says, "I'm going to surprise you." And I said, "Okay." So she turned it around. It was a picture of me on it. And she said she had found it on the internet. And she says, "I just typed in nail educator and you popped up." And I was just like, wow. So I guess I'm kind of becoming Tammy for some people.
Well, to me, you are Chris Davis, and that's more important. But I thank you so much for stopping by today and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you.
Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of Influencing Entrepreneurs, be sure to subscribe on YouTube at Nexagy Education.